Hey, general contractors, renovation experts, and construction professionals. Protecting your business should be a top priority. Your clients require you to have liability insurance as a condition of the contracts you sign. By having construction liability insurance, you not only fulfill those requirements, but also demonstrate professionalism, reliability, and a commitment to your client's protection. It's a win-win situation for your business. Construction liability insurance is vital to protect you from the risks and liabilities that come with your line of work. It provides essential coverage for property damage, coverage for third-party damage or bodily injury, and other incidents that may occur during construction or renovation projects. Visit zensurance.com/save35 for a free construction liability insurance quote and get the comprehensive protection you need. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey. On this episode, I speak with Wayne Dorris, the Cybersecurity Program Manager for the Americas for Access Communications, about some of the pitfalls and vulnerabilities construction firms face as they defend themselves against cyber attacks. But before that, here's some of the recent stories we've run in the Daily Commercial News and the Journal of Commerce. Daily Commercial News staff writer Don Wall has a piece about the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum expanding its advocacy mandate from focusing on women in the trades to include other underrepresented communities. The CAF revealed the realignment at their 2023 Supporting Women in Trades conference held in Winnipeg in the second week of June. CAF CEO France Devoit told the 300-plus delegates, quote, differently abled, gender diverse, and 2S LGBTQ+ individuals, Indigenous and racialized people who work in the skilled trades will benefit from a collective voice. I believe that women in the skilled trades can now lend a hand up and create an inclusive community and network for all those who deserve equitable opportunities and better treatment, end quote. Angela Gismondi's latest story is about a new development called Thornbury Acres, a residential farm cooperative on large lots that combines farming and condo living and allows condominium owners of each homestead to utilize agricultural and recreational common elements. The proposal for the project maintains 74% of the land in a rural landscape condition, according to the project website, and a minimum of 60% of the original land holding will remain available for the active primary agricultural or recreational use. The 150-acre site will include 37 residential units, have a 50-acre farm program, and 40 acres of passive recreation. Lots will range in size from 1.3 to 1.5 acres. Journal of Commerce staff writer Evan Saunders has a story about a new aquatic center in Burnaby, BC, budgeted at $187 million. The facility is funded from the area's capital plan and will jointly replace the C.G. Brown Memorial Pool and Burnaby Lake Arena at the Burnaby Lake Sports Complex, both of which were built in the early 1960s. Also, contributor Don Proctor has a story about the Hudson Yards project in New York getting a $6.88 billion funding injection through the Federal Transit Administration, and we have a letter to the editor that says People for Education should pull their head out of the sand when it comes to high school students and apprenticeships. And now here's my interview with Wayne Dorris about cybersecurity and construction. Enjoy. There recently were some cyber attacks of construction firms and other big firms. Maybe you could talk about, from the big firm side of things, what do they need to firm up? What vulnerabilities do they have at present? Without giving specific names or anything, what is something trend you've seen that people need to fix that they haven't yet?
Yeah, so really there's two big targets for construction firms as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. There's the opportunistic side, which is this is where we see ransomware coming more prevalent. And then you see a more targeted side, where I know that if this larger firm is doing work for, say, a large end customer, pick mm-hmm. any big tech Silicon Valley customer, or also for any government customers per se, rather than infiltrate those specific networks, it's easier to get access to the data through the construction side. So, mm-hmm. So when you look at that, right, the reason that construction companies are becoming such a bigger target is when we look at the ecosystem of, you're working on capital projects, they're huge money projects, and you're also connected to, I have Jacobs, AECOM, whomever, mm-hmm. as a prime, as this big MEP firm. And then you start having all these other different subs that work with them. And again, maybe on their own corporate network, they're doing pretty good. But when you start having a remote access for not only employees, but also for all of your other subs, mm-hmm. you also have to take into account how are they protecting. And those are vectors or pathways that these attacks can happen.
I was going to
So,
ask, is not to blame everything on the subs, because that's not really fair,
right.
but is that
No.
because they're smaller organizations with, maybe they don't have a dedicated IT person, or they're not up to date or whatever. Is that where usually the
Yeah,
penetration happens?
when you statistically look at it, right, major enterprises, of course, get compromised. But
Hmm.
if you look at the majority of the attack surface, it's in small and medium businesses. And usually, to your point, they don't have maybe as well of a cybersecurity plan or structure, right? And or
Hmm.
they may, like you said, they may contract out their IT security services, and so they only get them when they need them, and not thinking, you need them, all the time. But yeah, so it's really interesting in this aspect because this is why the Department of Defense instituted their CMMC requirements for DoD contractors, right? And when you look
Right.
at it, it's a way, if you look at the exact same requirements, it's a great kind of blueprint for if you're an MEP firm, and even if you're going to have other subs, kind of a way to collectively protect your organization and understand the cybersecurity posture of everybody that you're working with, right?
Hmm.
And really, that's what it gets down to is um, there's a lot of remote access. Are you using VPNs, or are you using VPNs that have not been compromised? But also, when you look at, as you get into an entire ecosystem chain, is the same cybersecurity posture the same across the board? And
Hmm.
that's tough to evaluate and get to, but realistically, from a risk point of view, that's really what has to happen. And a lot of times, let's face it, even on the procurement side, right? We understand a town all of a sudden has a major project, and of course they just say, "Well, oh, great! Now all the big construction companies that live across the country, of no matter what country I'm in, are going to come
Hmm.
in and do this project," and the local construction companies, of course, don't get a lot to it. But a lot of times there's procurement mandates to say, oh, you have to use X amount of
Right.
local labor or X amount of local whatever.
Hmm.
So that's great, but are you getting the same cybersecurity standard in that local smaller company because they're filling this procurement part? But are they cyber secure as, say, a major firm?
Right.
May or may not be, right? So that's usually where all of this kind of leads into the risk. I hate to say that, yeah, we don't want to blame the smaller companies, because I'm sure there are some smaller companies that
Hmm.
have a very good cybersecurity standard plan. But if we look like even Axis as a vendor, we're ISO 27001 certified, right? Like, would you expect that of a certain subcontractor component of, a drywall supplier or a pipe supplier or something like that? So again, I think when you look at the procurement side, we look at bonding requirements very well.
Hmm.
But are you looking at the cybersecurity capabilities of that subcontractor as well, right? How well they can protect information, not only of themselves, but if you're passing information back and forth to them, whether that's site plans or financial information, right? You're doing procurements back and forth. They're sending you invoices, you're billing to that. That's the other part. We're in the construction industry where we see it really getting hit, and that's why these ecosystems are so under attack. Is, oh, it's so easy for me to overtake these wire transfers or to force a fake invoice and get paid on
Hmm.
something. And again, these are major capital expenditures. So, oh, did we pay that $200,000 bill for that company? I know they're part of our approved vendor list,
Hmm.
something like that. So
Something can slip through the cracks. From
yeah.
the sounds of things, this is really going to age me, but I remember back when hackers were like some guy in his basement. That's the stereotype. It doesn't sound like that has any relevance whatsoever anymore. To do something at the level of sophistication you're talking about, where they know the procurement process, then they know that's a vulnerability. Who are like, I would assume there's like criminal groups, non-state actors, that kind of thing, depending what the project is or how much they can get out of it. Who are the people who are kind of perpetrating these attacks? And like you said, it's intensifying. So why is it intensifying?
Yeah, when we look at the bad actor side of it, right? Everybody thinks, oh, there's this one, like you could say a hacker group, and they have all of these
Hmm.
specialties. But in reality, That's not really the way it works, right? Like usually, unless they're a nation state attacker, right, that will take that off the
Which
table.
happens too, right? Yeah.
Right, which happens too, which are targeted for these environments. Because, like I said, if you're working for a major firm or a major end customer or a government, yeah, they're going to do the long target on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at like ransomware, that is very minimal, right? Like that doesn't take a ton of expertise. And the thing is, there are just hundreds of thousands of these, right? It's not just one. And the reason that is when we look at like cybercrime as a whole in 2022 was $6 trillion, right?
Okay. Wow.
So we are, if we looked at that at the same scale of GDP or gross domestic output for a country, that would be the third largest GDP number, right behind the U.S. and China. So we're living in the lifetime of where probably cybercrime will be larger than GDP of actual nations. And that is why it's not just as simple as, well, it's some kid in a basement. This is why attackers are really getting super sophisticated. Even when vulnerabilities are reported on software, right? In an MEP firm, think about it. You have Revit, AutoCAD, you have all of these other systems that you have to maintain. Are you keeping those up to date? Vulnerabilities are being looked at as, hey, how can I get in to get to this information? You have the attackers are kind of doing a cost benefit analysis. In other words, they may already have access to a network. The standard time that a bad actor is on your network is around 270 days.
Okay.
So a lot of times, like and particularly if they're nation state or they're playing the long game, when these vulnerabilities come out for different softwares or platforms, they are doing cost benefit analysis to go, how much of this do I have out there, and then what can I use to extract to perform an exploit, so that if this is for financial software, that's definitely something I'm going to pay attention to, or anything along those lines, right?
So let's say you are a smaller firm, or a larger firm for that matter. What are some things that they aren't sort of handling right now, and what are some ways they can sort of shore up some defenses?
Yeah, I think even though it may not apply to you, if you look at the NIST 800-171 and the requirements for the CMMC and how we would protect CUI, which is controlled unclassified information. Right. Even if you just looked at, hey, this is what they're evaluating cybersecurity posture, and there's 3 basic levels, right? And just look at them and say, do an assessment and say, hey, am I doing these things? Would I be able to attain this level if I needed to, right? And that's always good to know before you have a procurement obligation to do so. But you can kind of look at it as a base thing. The other thing I would say, when was the last time you actually did a cybersecurity assessment, right? And really just get, truth, where you at, where your gaps are, where your biggest risks are, and start, checking that down. And a lot of that may be, and, we look at what's happened, recently with COVID. There's been more remote work, and particularly, even in MEP firms, construction, like, oh, we now have to cater to, you can be in the office X amount of time, remote X amount of time. And when that happened, now not only is it your major firm's IT responsibility for protecting your laptop or, your data, now you're at home, right? So you're far more vulnerable. Maybe you forget to put the VPN on, right? Same way in construction, right? A lot of it's remote. You got construction workers, you're at a hotel, it's unsecured Wi-Fi. Again, if you're not using a VPN, even if you're doing well at your corporate office, you have to remember a lot of the times you're not there and you're out and you're remote, and how are you securing that as well? So
even charging your phone now is apparently insecure.
Yeah.
So I try not to when I'm at an airport, which I never used to do. Is there any way, culturally speaking, like we know construction is slow to adopt things that may be changing, but But do you find that because people are, using their hands, operating the tools, doing a lot of practical stuff that has nothing to do with computers, they just don't think about this side of things? Or has that changed over the years?
I think it's changed over the years. I think, yeah, there's still if you look at, the brick and mortar side of things, right? Laying concrete, doing floors, doing steel. But
Yeah.
Even on the back side of the house, like, back in the day, everything was printed plans. Everybody's using some kind of a tablet device with the plans on there, Bluebeam, making as-built as you go. So I think it's kind of changed some, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think it's getting a little better, right? Obviously, as younger people kind of get into it, they're kind of like, oh, I'm used to doing, or at least I'm used to using technology where I need it. Now, whether or not they're using it securely, that is the toughest part, right? But yeah,
there's also more vulnerabilities because more people are familiar with technology, right? So it's it's not a catch-22, but it's another point to be worried about, I suppose. And I guess finally, I'd ask where, if people want to know more, if they want to learn how they can secure their businesses or what threats they're up against, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll forward you over, Warren, the stuff for CMMC. That's a good
I can put that in our show notes for sure.
Reference for that. Also, CISA has a pretty basic checklist of things as an organization. Like I said, the important thing is assess where you're at, understand where your particular risks are. But as a whole, it's about, a lot of times people say, well, I have a small business. What data would people be interested in? And really the point is, if you can't run your business, like if you're shut down for a day because all your stuff's been ransomware, well, there's that, right?
Right.
But then also you have to look at, the data may not be interesting to you, but it may be interesting to somebody else. So, and again, they could be targeting that and you might be the weakest link. So a lot of that, looking at it from, and that's why I like the term of CUI, controlled unclassified information, meaning it's not classified, so it's not that important. Like, this is like nation state,
national security
kind of
stuff,
national security kind of stuff, right? But if you think about it, like if I have on a set of plans, the physical security system, well, that's pretty important to me. I might know where camera angles, what they're looking at. I know how stuff's laid out. So even in just plan aspects, you can say, well, this isn't really important. And I can say, even on my side of the house, there's lots of times, we were helping with a layout and I would end up getting the entire set of plans, right? Like maybe in reality, I only needed the electrical stuff and, some Division 16, Division 28 kind of stuff, but I ended up getting everything, right? And more importantly, what happens with the use of that information when you're done with it?
Yeah. Where does it go, if anywhere?
Where does it go? The problem is that a lot of it's out there and it just, sits. So, but I think just, working on good, regular cybersecurity hygiene, having really good, firewalls, understanding how important data flows through your organization, how you're locking it down and who has access to that, and reviewing those lists. Because that's another thing. You could say, even if you have your own in-house IT people, your domain administrator, he's left the company, but he still may have all the keys to the kingdom, even though he's left the company, right? So a lot of times people particularly don't end up saying, hey, we need to rechange all these passwords and things on an annual basis at least. But all of these kinds of tips and tricks are in CISA's outline. And if you look at the CMMC outline, it kind of outlines those things.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for your time, Warren.
And that's it for this episode of the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Spotify, as well as the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening.